Washoe County Library System welcomes you to our monthly series, the Nevada Historical Society presents High Noon with Neal Cobb. This afternoon's topic is Nevada Northern Railway National Historic Landmark steaming 35 years with Nevada Northern Railway Foundation President Mark Bassett. My name is Jennifer, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. And now I would like to introduce Catherine Mcgee, Director of the Nevada Historical Society. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Jennifer, thank you so much for that great introduction. And I am just thrilled to be here because I am sitting in for Sherry Hayes Zorn. So I don't often get this wonderful opportunity to host. I am really excited to have all these programs here, and especially I'm so thankful to the Washoe County Library System for hosting us and also making these available online. So thank you so much. So Neal Cobb needs no introduction, but of course that's my job to introduce Neal Cobb. So I met Neal 6 years ago, and the first thing I said to Neal was, "You are a treasure." And if you all don't know Neal Cobb, he is indeed a treasure. And he has been hosting this event for us for more years than I can even count, I think. And it's one of our longest running programs. So Neal is great to bring history through the Nevada Historical Society to you. So Neal, take it away.
Catherine, so thank you so very much for that introduction. It is my honor today to introduce our speaker, Mark S. Bassett. He has been involved with the Nevada Northern Railroad Museum for the last 24 years, first as a volunteer and later for the last 20 years as the president. He is a hands-on manager, whether in the office, driving a diesel locomotive, calling all aboard as the conductor, or leading a group on a tour around the property. Mark and his dedicated staff and volunteers have combined their efforts in preserving the National Historic Landmark Railroad, eventually evolving into Nevada's premier rural attraction. Mark's interest in heritage railroading began back in Fort Collins, Colorado, where he was president of the Fort Collins Municipal Railroad Society, a community group that restored a trolley car to operation. That involvement led to his experience as a National Trust for Historic Preservation Main Street project located in Laramie, Wyoming, as the manager. Mark has appeared in many television shows, including American Restoration, Modern Marvels, and The Pawn Stars, promoting all involving aspects of the Nevada Northern Railroad Museum and Nevada's railroad heritage. So at this time, I would like to introduce a very charismatic individual, Mr. Mark Burnett.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Neal, for that warm welcome. What I'm going to do is take you back in time. The Nevada Northern Railway, in its rebirth, has been steaming for 35 years. And operating a 19th century railroad in the 21st century in the most remote city in the contiguous United States is challenging. And I want to touch on some of those challenges, some of the successes, and a couple of oopsies too. To get started, the railroad was built because Mark Requa had a dream. His dream was to develop the copper deposits that are near Ruth, Nevada, about 10 miles further west from Ely. And to do so, he would need a mine, a mill, and a smelter. They'd all have to be built. And it was the Nevada Northern Railway that made this all possible. He started building the railroad in 1905. It came to Ely in 1906, developed the mine, and the first load of processed copper left White Pine County in 1909. an amazing task without computers or trucks. The railroad was built specifically to develop the copper mine, and the railroad operated as a conveyor from the copper mine at Ruth to the mill and the smelter in Mcgill. This is Locomotive 92, hauling one of the copper trains from Ruth to Mcgill. The railroad also hauled freight. The railroad was founded in 1905. The mine started in 06. And so for all the freight, all the supplies, everything came to the community by the railroad. And of course, the railroad also carried the passengers. Back in 1905, if you were going anywhere, you had a choice. You either walked, took a horse, or you took a train. And so people took the train. On the Nevada Northern Railway, passenger service actually ended on July 31st, 1941. Buses replaced the passenger train on August 1st, but very fortunately for us, the Public Utilities Commission insisted that a passenger train be kept in case the newfangled buses didn't work out. And that is what saved our passenger train. The copper mine closed in 1978. It was a major employer in White Pine County. And as you can imagine, a lot of people left because they lost their jobs. In 1983 rather, the mill and the smelter closed. And that, with the closure of the mill and the smelter, the railroad was no longer needed, and the copper dream in White Pine County appeared to have come to an end. The last Nevada Northern Railway train operated on June 21st, 1983, with Locomotive 401 and Caboose 6, closing the curtain on 78 years of railroading on the Nevada Northern Railway. But very fortunately, it was not the final curtain call for the Nevada Northern Railway. And the Locomotive 401 and Caboose 6 still exist. Caboose 6 you'll find on our excursion trains almost daily. And Locomotive 41 still exists, and we hope to bring her home this fall. I'll tell you more about that in a bit. So here's the community. The major employer has shut down. Let's face it, Nevada has a lot of ghost towns scattered throughout the state. When the mines played out, the towns died, and the community was afraid that was going to happen here. They went to Kennecott and said, hey, can you run excursion trains for us? And Kennecott replied, we're a mining company. We don't do tourist railroads. To give the community credit undauntedly, they went back to Kennecott and said, you know what? You don't need the railroad anymore. Will you donate it to the community? And surprisingly, the answer was yes, we'll give it to you. And Governor Richard Bryan presided over the donation of the railroad to the community. And so what was actually given to the community? It was a 56-acre complex with 60 buildings and structures. It's now a National Historic Landmark. At that time, we only had one steam locomotive. Since then, we picked up 3 additional original steam locomotives. We had 6 diesel locomotives, 2 electric locomotives, 60 pieces of antique rolling stock, 30 miles of track with a tunnel, an enormous paper record, and it was gifted to the city of Ely and the foundation. And everything is maintained and cared for by the foundation. So the main complex here is 1 mile long by ½ mile wide. And the value in 1987 was just over $7 million. The estimated value of the complex today is over $48 million. The East Ely Yard is a National Historic Landmark. This is a view of the complex looking to the west. And this building is the transportation building where my office is. This is the East Ely Depot. This is the freight depot. And back here where you see the steam raising, that is the machine shop and the engine house complex. As I mentioned, there's 60 buildings and structures on the complex. The oldest building dates to 1906. The railroad is considered the most authentic. This is outfit car 06. She was built in September of 1872. Think about it. When she rolled off the erecting floor, President Grant was in the White House and not on the $50 bill. She's still in service. We do use her periodically. She is the smoothest riding car on the railroad. We also have the original freight equipment. This is boxcar 1024. She was delivered to us in October of 1912. And it's the most complete. Not only do we have the locomotives and the support equipment, this is Locomotive 93 pushing the rotary snowplow into the engine house, but we have the paper record. We have everything. And what these two photographs illustrate is our master mechanic's name is John Henry. John Henry stands 6'7". And he's up on the second floor of the storehouse. This is Con, our archivist. And John Henry stands up. And when he stands up into a box. And inside the box were documents for the railroad from 1906 to 1920. And these documents are amazing. And I'll share just one document with you. This is a disciplinary record bulletin from 1918. And if you go to the second paragraph here, a conductor has been given 25 demerit marks for not wearing gauze mask on passenger train in accordance with the health board's regulations and instructions by this company. Does that sound a little oddly familiar? This is during the Spanish flu epidemic, and the passenger conductors were supposed to be wearing masks on the train, just like we were doing last year too. We do have a curation and archive department. Our curator curates all of our photographs, and some of our artifacts are rather large. I mean, it's a steam locomotive, and all the support tools, and we are curating all of that. And then we also have an archive. And one of the things that we've done that I think is really amazing, we now have an online archive. If you go to our homepage, nnry.com, you'll see on the center of the screen, explore the online archive. And currently there's 4,260 items online, including 33 artifacts, 149 blueprints, over almost 3,000 historic documents, and photographs and maps. And to date, the online archive has been used by 18,000 users and 126,000 page views. And we have 2,500 additional digital files that we'll be uploading. What makes the Nevada Northern Railway so incredibly special is it is the sole survivor from a grand era in Nevada history. Once upon a time, over 54 railroads operated in Nevada. If you go back to the founding of the state, we're known for gold and silver. If you're processing gold and silver to move all the materials, to bring in all the supplies, to bring in the people, to have a successful town and mine, you need a railroad. And so railroads were built across the state. You have the Virginia and Truckee, the Las Vegas and Tonopah, just to name a few. Out of all the railroads, the Nevada Northern Railway is the only one left. We are the only survivor, and it's intact, and it's operating on its original track with its original equipment. This is Locomotive 40, and behind Locomotive 40 is the East Ely Depot. You can go into the East Ely Depot and purchase a ticket to ride the train, just like people have been doing there since 1907. And This is one of my favorite photos. This photo was taken in 2021. We had a very special event where we had the opportunity to steam up all 3 of our locomotives. This photo could have been taken in 1921. Yeah, it's the Nevada Northern Railway is just an amazing time capsule. And we have challenges. Ely is purported to be the most remote incorporated city in the contiguous United States. And to put that in perspective, a round trip to Walmart is 400 miles. And we're operating a tourist railroad here. This sign appears on US 6 just outside of Ely. This is the sign going to Tonopah. And so the first challenge was restore a steam locomotive. The foundation was able to do that between 1984 and 1987. The photo on the left there, all of the boiler tubes are out of locomotive 40 as the boiler is being inspected. And the workers here are sitting inside the locomotive's firebox, installing new boiler tubes. And the numbers that you see are the thickness of the steel from when the locomotive was built in 1910. The steel's over a ½ inch thick. And they accomplished it. They got locomotive 40 running by Memorial Day weekend in 1987. And on that opening weekend, almost 1,000 people rode behind locomotive 40. It was a great celebration, and it was the start of the rebirth of the railroad. But this presented its own set of challenges. And the challenges are, how do you preserve, interpret, and make relevant a 19th century complex that is hazardous, this is an industrial complex, to a 21st century audience that's clueless about safety, the past, and technology? Our strength is our weakness is our strength. Our strength is you can walk into our 1907 engine house, and it is the same today as it was in 1907. When they built the engine house in 1907, they built open pits. These are huge inspection pits, so workers can go underneath the locomotive and inspect the locomotive. In 1907, they did not put barriers around the pits. We don't have barriers around the pits today. What we do is a safety briefing to our visitors, and we explain to them that the engine house was built in 1907 without safety barriers around the open pits. It's our tradition that we maintain today, no safety barriers around the pit. And we believe you're intelligent enough not to fall into one of the open pits. So please don't fall into a pit and ruin our tradition. I'm happy to report no one has, and our tradition is still rock solid. But this is something that we constantly emphasize, is the safety aspect. We now have signs around the complex explaining the different buildings and what was done there. And to get to these signs, you have to cross the track. And of course, we have trains operating on the track. So the crews are very aware, and we work with our visitors to make them very aware too. Next challenge is, how do you display a historic collection of operating transportation artifacts scattered over a mile-long complex, at the same time working with 21st century expectations of visitors like restrooms and lighted parking? And the number one question we receive is, where's the museum? People come here expecting to go into a building. We don't have a building. We have over 40 buildings. And so they basically have to go down a path. And so that takes a little orientation to our visitors. But again, the 21st century expectations we have to address. And then how do we protect our visitors, the buildings, the equipment, the written record, and the sight lines, not only for the 21st century, but the 22nd century as well. So as we move forward, these are the things that we're always considering. Our first restroom project, as I mentioned, our ridership was on average about 5,000 people a year. You split that out over the course of an operating season. It isn't very much. There were restrooms available in the East Ely Depot. We had 2 one-holers, one for women and one for men. Well, as we became more and more successful, we had more and more people riding the train, and our ridership involved families with young children and older visitors. And at the end of the trip, there was one common denominator there. Both our older visitors and the children needed to do what? They needed to use the restroom. And so when the train came back, there would be lines forming outside the respective restrooms. The restrooms were never designed for 20, 30, 40 people to use them all at the same time. And so what a person was taking away from their visit was not the great train ride, not the wonderful original engine house. What they were remembering is that they had to stand in line to use a stinky toilet. So this building that we're raising the roof on, this is the boiler building. The railroad stopped using the boilers. I wanted to convert that into restrooms, and as luck would have it, the building was 12 inches too short to meet modern code. And so if you have a century-old steam crane, what you can do is you can lift the roof off the building. And so that's exactly what we did. We lifted the roof off the building. We added 2 course of brick, put the roof back on the building, and now it's our restrooms. Since it was originally the boiler building, I wanted to keep the smokestacks on top of the building. So it's been a tremendous help, and that was my first of 3 restroom projects. And challenge 5 is, how do you fund it? When I took over in 2002, I wrote an article saying if I only had $10 million, life would be grand. I was only off by about $90 million. So the plan was for the railroad to become an economic generator for the community. Instead of mining copper, we were going to mine the tourists. And here we are in the plaza here, getting ready to board the train. Big money was needed. If you go back to 1983, 1984, the community wanted the railroad. The city of Ely really didn't want to own a railroad, and the foundation really didn't want to restore the complex. The community wanted something to generate tourist dollars, and the foundation wanted to operate trains. So they went to Nevada State Parks and said, hey, have we got a deal for you? And Nevada State Park said, no, it's going to be $8 million to convert that into a state park. And this is in 1984. And they said, we'll never get the money. So no dice, too expensive. Then they tried with Nevada State Museums. And again, the answer was no dice, too expensive. So we had to do it ourselves. And doing it ourselves, we operated excursion trains. We used our historic coaches, 2, 5, and 20. We ran about 45 trips per season. Average ridership was about 5,000 people per season, and the operating income was about $120,000 per year. Well, $120,000 doesn't get you very far when you have 30 miles of track that needs repairing. You got steam locomotives that need to be restored, buildings that need to be restored, and payroll and utilities and everything else that has to be paid. Then we had an oops. In 1995, we had 2 accidents, had a hard coupling at Keystone, and then we had a collision. A contractor was working on the track. He lost control of a loaded flat car with ties. It ran down the rails, slammed into the front of Locomotive 93 that was going up the track with coach 2 and 5. They're heavily damaged. There was a settlement for $750,000. 93 was repaired. 2 coaches were donated, we went out and purchased 2 coaches. Magna donated coach 6 and then financed coach 7. But at the same time, buildings were deteriorating. The Mcgill Depot, the engine house, the RIP building, and we had track issues. One of our trestles was on the verge of collapse, and 2 public grade crossings needed repairs. And this is where we've been. We had a short operating season, no long-term plan, no financial plan. In June of 2003, we had a grand total of $426 in the bank. Had no vision, no professionalism, and just no plan. So this is where we are now. Our operating season is year-round. We have 550 trains that operate. Trains operate year-round now, and we're open late until 7:15. We've learned about the Cosmos and Heritage Railroading, and I'll talk more about that a little later on. We're open daily year-round. You can come here in the middle of January, and we are open, and you can visit us. Our steam trains operate April through October and in January and February. And we do walking tours. And the reason the word forced is in there is because what we used to do is the excursion train would come back from its trip. It would stop in front of the East Ely Depot, and we would tell the passengers as they got off the train, hey, would you like a tour of the machine shop and engine house? It's 2 blocks that way, and we'd be happy to give you a guided tour. Well, only about 5% of the people getting off the train would do the tour. So we looked at this, and we actually have 2 ways of coming into the East Ely yard. We leave on what we call the main line, and we come back into the yard on what we call the engine house lead. The engine house lead takes us through the yard. It takes us down to the engine house and machine shop. The train stops. We announce to our passengers, hey, would you like to do a tour of the machine shop and engine house? It's right here. Now, 95% of the people get off the train to do the tour of the machine shop and engine house. In 2021, our ridership hit 18,000. Our visitation was 36,000. It was the largest year that the foundation has ever experienced. And here in our 35th year, we're on track to beat last year. And if someone could explain this to me, I am all ears. I am very happy that this is happening, but I'm kind of totally amazed too. Our membership, we have over 6,000 financial supporters. A sizable percentage have never been to Ely and never will be. We're basically following the LLB model there. Our highest level of membership is $10,000 annually. And yes, we have members at that level. When I created that level, it was sort of controversial. People said, oh, no one will ever give at that level. And I thought, well, they might, and they do. And I got that idea from art museums. Fundraising, we have raised and invested over $36 million in the complex. We currently have over $11 million in grants under administration. We have over 125 volunteers. They donate $240,000 worth of labor. Our social media, we got 117,000 likes on Facebook, and it's not uncommon for our post to hit over 100,000 views. And our bacon video has reached over $2.3 million. This bacon video has spun off into Iron Horse Cookery, a video series, a cookbook, and an event. And I'll briefly tell you the story here. It's a Sunday morning. I'm off. I'm at my computer. I have my coffee. I go to my Facebook feed, see what's happening. And a video pops up. And hey, guys are cooking bacon in the cab of a steam locomotive. Great. Wait a minute. That's a Nevada Northern Railway steam locomotive. And what are they doing? I go to reach for the phone to tell them to take that video down. And I look, video's been up for an hour and it's received 10,000 views. 2 hours, 20,000 views. 3 hours, 30,000 views. Maybe the public's trying to tell me something here. And within a month or so, it hit over 1 million views. And so this spun off, and we created the Iron Horse Cookery Cookbook. There is a series of videos on our website showing you how to cook in the Iron Horse. And then we had the first Iron Horse Cookery cook-off here in Ely, and where people actually cooked meals in the cab of a steam locomotive. And unfortunately, that was just before COVID. We haven't done it since COVID, but we hope to bring it back next year. My point being is, this is something I wasn't expecting. We saw an opportunity, and we jumped on that opportunity. Building improvements. We've saved 6 buildings from collapse. We've invested millions in the buildings. Our chief engineer's building is now a bunkhouse. Track, we've got $1.5 million in the track and millions invested in the locomotives. When I took over, I knew I had problems with the engine house and the machine shop. It's the largest building on the complex. We had a structural engineer's report that said the building should be condemned. Nothing of historic value should be stored in the building, and people should not be allowed in the building. Great. So where do we put all the locomotives? Where do we repair locomotives? What do we do? Well, we were very fortunate. We got funding and we repaired that building. And now it will stand for another 100 years, according to our structural engineer. But in the middle of all this, one of my volunteers came to me and says, Mark, what are you going to do about the Mcgill Depot? And I go, hey, where's the Mcgill Depot? Oddly enough, it's in Mcgill. And the upper photograph there is my first view of the Mcgill Depot. The roof had failed and that wall was failing, and we were on the verge of the Mcgill pile of rocks. We've been able to strengthen the building, stabilize the building, rehab the building, and we're also doing work on the inside. On the left is at the beginning of the work, and on the right is how it appears today. And we're on the verge of opening up the track from Ely to the Mcgill Depot. That's what that $10 million grant is for. The chief engineer's building here in the East Ely Yard, the upper photograph, pretty sad. We've rehabbed the building, and we've done 2 things here. The rehab of the building has opened up 4 sleeping rooms, 2 bathrooms, a sitting area, and a kitchen. We use this building for our interns, our volunteers, and when those rooms are available, we rent them out to the public too. So you can literally spend the night at the museum. And this is the inside of the chief engineer's building. Upper left is the sitting room, bottom is one of the sleeping rooms. And this is one of my favorite projects. This is the Blacksmith Shop. The upper left-hand photo doesn't show it. The building had a 12-degree lean. And I thought we were going to lose the building. I thought it would collapse before we got to it. We received a grant. We disassembled the building. We removed all of the metal sheathing there, numbered it, stored it off on the building site. Then we rebuilt the structure of the building. And I told the contractor, please use as much of the original building fabric as you could. This black line you see here is the only piece he could salvage. That's the door header. And then this is the building as it appears today. And we painted it back into traditional Nevada Northern Railway colors. And in the process of doing this, he found the original smokestack. Track, we rebuilt railroad crossings. This is US 93. It's a 4-lane highway where we have the crossing. And then we have dumped over $1 million in our track. Locomotive 40, she was delivered here in 1910, and she is an official Nevada state symbol. I was over in Carson City for a seminar. I was walking down a hall in one of the state buildings, and they have framed prints of all the state symbols. I got to the end of the hall. There is no state locomotive. So I called my state senator and said, you know what? Nevada needs a state locomotive. And he entered a bill. And so NRS 235.135 created the state locomotive known as Locomotive 40. And the other thing I should point, this photo is from the 1930s. This photo is from 2011. And you can play, the headlight is a little different. The people obviously are different, but everything else is essentially the same. And Locomotive 40, she was saved from scrapping in 41. She was stored in the engine house. She was used for the railroad's 50th anniversary. We rebuilt the boiler and returned her to service in 1987 and again in 2005. Currently, she's undergoing another boiler rebuilding. We're under the Federal Railroad Administration, and every 15 years, we have to go through and inspect and rebuild the boiler. When this is done, the boiler is going to be good till 2038. And at this time, we're also rebuilding her running gear. She has issues dating back to the 1920s. When we're done with that, she'll be good for until 2073. And then there's the tale of the ghost train. As I mentioned, passenger service ended in 1941. She was stuck in the engine house December 7th, 41. The United States is attacked by Japan. We enter World War II. The demand for copper is huge. And to process the copper, they need scrap metal. They melt the scrap metal down into balls, cannonballs, and any scrap went to Mcgill to be melted. So the tale becomes Locomotive 40 is beloved, and we don't want to have her melted. So we hide her. We hide her in the engine house under a bunch of scrap. At night, we move her over to Mcgill, hide her in Mcgill. Then we take her from Mcgill back to the copper mine. We hide her there. She only moves at night, and she becomes the ghost train. The real story is, again, the PUC said she had to be saved, and then the general manager of the railroad at the time asked his boss, can't we save her? And his boss said yes. So not an exciting story, but we have them at. This is Locomotive 93. She is literally the world's luckiest locomotives. She should be razor blades right now. She was delivered here in January of 1909. She was saved from scrapping in 52. She was given away, and she was on public display until 1990. She was returned to the railroad in 1990. We returned her to service in 1993. She had the accident. We repaired her then. Then we had to rebuild her boiler. She did participate in the 2002 Winter Olympics. She went to Salt Lake City. Then in 2007, her running gear failed. Two of her axles were head stamped 12 of 08, as in 1908. We were able to get funding to rebuild her running gear. And when we installed the new axles, we installed them in December of 2008. So the axles are stamped again 12 of 08. We rebuilt her in time for her centennial. And that is Governor Gibbons. And this is actually how you do not christen a steam locomotive with champagne. Governor Gibbons was very gracious over this. And the other thing is, after he did this, we received a large donation from White Pine Tourism and Recreation to help us with the rebuild. And the head of Tour and Rec, Ed, came to me and said, Mark, I want to do something that no one else in the world does. And that is, I want to shoot fireworks off the back of a moving train. And I'm thinking, Ed, there could be a reason why no one else does that. And Ed said, no, let's do it. And I go, Ed, if you can get permission from the state fire marshal, the county fire marshal, and the city fire chief, if they all say yes, I'll do it. Me thinking there's adult supervision out there. There wasn't. So in January of 2009, we shot fireworks off the back of a moving train above downtown Ely. And we've been doing it ever since. And the next time will be this coming January, the Saturday of Martin Luther King weekend. So come to Ely and watch fireworks being shot off the back of a moving train. Locomotive 81, the Green Wonder. She was delivered here in 1917. She too went on public display. We were able to rebuild her and return her to service in 2021. She has a green boiler jacket because when she came, she was delivered with a green boiler jacket, and so we went back to that. The boiler is good till 2036. The running gear is good until 2071. And this is so great. We have the original record on Locomotive 81. This letter is August 22, 1916, from the Vice President General Manager to the purchasing agent saying, the president said I can buy a new locomotive. How do I do this? And then opportunity knocks. This is Locomotive 401 and 201. They were delivered 70 and 71 years ago. And quite frankly, they should be razor blades, but they survived over 70 years. And we are working, well, we brought 201 home. We're working on bringing 401 home. And this is Locomotive 201. She was donated by Kennecott to a railroad museum in Suquamish, Washington. The Railroad Museum deaccessioned it and donated it to us. The only thing we had to do was bring it to Ely. And she had to come by the highway because neither railroad museum is connected by tracks. And that was quite the process. And you can see there in the trailer, it was something. And then when we got her here, we had to unload her. And we're going to do Locomotive 401 next. Again, Locomotive 401 is a very rare locomotive. She's the only diesel locomotive that was purchased by the Nevada Northern Railway. And she was the only one purchased by a short line railroad. And this paint scheme is called the Desert War Bonnet. She's the only locomotive that wore it. And once we get it here, we hope to have her here this fall. We're going to repaint her. She does operate. I actually had the opportunity to operate her. And we're going to repaint her. And a couple of people have said, oh, don't repaint her. That's the original paint. It's not the original paint. What we have found out going through our records is she was repainted regularly and she was washed and waxed every weekend. I don't wash and wax my car. I can't imagine washing and waxing a diesel locomotive. The other thing that's very cool, this is the cab of the locomotive. This is called the blue card. And you can see the reporting year here is 1983. This is still in the cab of the locomotive. So we're very excited to have the opportunity to bring her home. And we brought Locomotive 801 back from the dead. She was purchased, or she was built by Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1942 for Kennecott. Last time she ran was 1983, so she spent half of her life sitting in the engine house, and we brought her out and we fired her up on July 1st, and she started up the first time. And she does run, and we are going to add her to our operating fleet of locomotives. So how did we do it? The National Trust for Historic Preservation has a model, and basically the parallels between small downtowns and small museums are the same. Becoming passé, drop off in visitors and shoppers, need major financial investment, old and stale, relevant, and getting new blood. So what we did is the program has 4 components that must work together. Organization, must have a strong organization. Promotion, got to tell the people you're there. Design, how do you present yourself to the public? Economic restructuring, does it cash flow? And I added preservation because that's what we did. And so we've developed exciting programs. Be the engineer, you can actually operate one of our steam locomotives on a 14-mile round trip, or you can ride with the locomotive. As I mentioned earlier, you can spend the night in the museum, you can sleep in a caboose, you can sleep in the crew bunkhouse. We do have Railroad Reality Week. We took a page from Mark Twain, Huckleberry Finn, People actually pay us $1,000 to spend the week at the railroad, working on the railroad, and we work them like dogs. The harder we work them, the happier they are. And then we also do winter photo shoots, and we call this program Hands-On History. And we've developed special event trains, the Rock and Roll and Geology train, the Wild West, the Silver State Flyer, and the Roaring Twenties Limited. And that is from the last Roaring Twenties Limited. We're sort of recreating Nevada in the Roaring Twenties. We got the dry part people. The gentleman with the fedora there is holding a Tommy gun. We have a prop Tommy gun, and the people just enjoy it. Astro Tourism, I got to touch on this. Great Basin National Park is an international dark sky park. It's 60 miles east of Ely on a 2-lane highway. The park there has a wonderful astronomy program. You drive out there during the day, the sun goes down, you see the stars. Big problem. Now you have to drive back to Ely on 60 miles, a 2-lane highway under incredibly dark skies. So I got with Great Basin National Park. We created the Great Basin Star Train, and we bring our visitors to a pad that is just outside of Ely, and we have the ranger there, and we do a star program, and this program has become wildly successful. And we do the star trains. The Milky Way is just an hour away by train, the Great Basin Star Train. Now, for some reason, the park superintendent won't give me his rangers, more than one night a week, and I fully understand why. So we created what we call the Sunset Stars and Champagne Train. And again, it's at the Nevada Northern Railway, and Milky Way is just an hour away by train. The Star Trains sell out a year in advance, and the Sunset Star Trains generally sell out every evening. One of my favorite sayings is attributed to Napoleon: don't send me good generals, send me lucky generals. You're featured on the History Channel's American Restoration in 7 episodes, and the way this came together is I wanted a strongbox for the museum. We couldn't find one. I purchased one on eBay. It was in pretty tough shape. I put it in my car. I happened to be in Las Vegas. I Googled I Googled Rick's Restoration because I had seen him on Pawn Stars. Sure enough, he pops up on Google Maps. I drive to his house. The gate is open. I drive into his backyard, and that's where he does the restoration work. And everyone ignores us, and I can't understand why. Find out later the gate is normally locked and it's by appointment only. Well, Rick came out. He was very gracious. He said, yeah, we can restore that. Let's go see Kelly. I go in, I meet with his wife, and Kelly says, yes, we can restore that for you. Here's the price. And by the way, do you have anything else that needs restoration? And I go, funny you should mention that. We do have a few items. And that became the partnership, and it was a fabulous partnership. The episodes never die. They're in constant reruns. The episodes are 10 years old now. They're still there. And what I found out is I was out on the plaza here at the railroad, and a family sees me, and they come running across the plaza going, oh, Mark, and they start speaking French to me. And the only French I know is no parlez-vous français. And they go, yes, you do. And I go, no, I'm pretty sure I don't. Yes, you do. And I go, why do you say that? Well, it turns out in France, I speak French because the episodes have been dubbed. And so I speak French there. But the episodes play in Germany, France, the Philippines, everywhere. And we've been on Pawn Stars. Also, we got contacted by CBS, and they said, we'd like to film your Star Train. I go, great. You come out, we do the Star Train. I said, you want to film the steam locomotive or anything like that? No, just the Star Train. Well, as luck would have it, Locomotive 40 is coming across the fill. Cameraman picks up his camera, gets some B-roll, and this is August, and they do the thing and the whole bit. September, October, November comes by, nothing happens. And all of a sudden on Christmas morning, I get a call from our webmaster, Mark. The website's blowing up. People want to buy Star Train tickets. We don't have the Star Train tickets up. We got to get the Star Train tickets up. And I go, David, it's Christmas. Let's relax. We'll do it tomorrow. Then I get interested and I go, hey, I wonder why this is happening. So I go, and it turns out Merry Christmas from CBS. They ran that episode on Christmas Day. I called David back and I go, David, the website's blowing up. CBS ran the episode. Let's get the Star Train tickets up so people can buy them. He goes, Mark, it's Christmas. And I go, oh, you got it out of your system? Let's do it. So we do it. By 1 o'clock, we're selling Star Train tickets. Staff comes in on the 26th. They think, nothing's happening. And there's like 300 emails to answer, 70 tickets to process, and all the voicemails were plugged. And this happened again in 2019, where CBS this Sunday morning comes out. They film the Star Train again, and we get 4 minutes and 46 seconds of national television exposure, and the Star Trains sell out all the time. We started the Star Trains only 2 a season, then 4 a season, and now there's 15 a season. And we were featured on The Big Bang Theory, which was really exciting, and they pronounced Nevada and Ely correctly. And we have still been very fortunate. We were featured in AT&T commercial. We've been featured in movies. And recently, we were featured in the Washington Post. In Nevada, most authentic railway site has steam, smoke, and a cat. And we've been very fortunate. The other thing is, too, we have to involve the next generation. When we were doing Locomotive 40 in 2004, the master mechanic at the time was 3 months older than I am. He called in, it was November, he called in and said, I have a headache, I'll be in at lunchtime. He never came back. He died of an aneurysm. And when he died, it was a tragedy for him, his family, and for us, because all of his knowledge went poof, gone. And I walked down to the engine house that night, and there's Locomotive 40, all the tubes are gone. And my thing is, how am I going to get this back together? I vowed that I would engage young adults, and I've done that. This is John Henry. He's our master mechanic. John has started with us when he was 15 years old. Lennox, the shop foreman, he started when he was 6 years old with his grandfather. And Nicholas started when he was 17. He's shop lead. Nicholas is a qualified steam engineer at 19. Lennox is a qualified fireman at 18. I have sent them out as the engine crew on our steam locomotives at 19 and 18 years old. And I should also mention steam locomotives are rolling bombs. You don't pay attention to what you're doing. The locomotive literally blows up and you have very tragic results. But these two individuals are highly trained and skilled, and they know exactly what they're doing. And I'm very proud of them and all the others down there too. And I have to embarrass Lennox all the time. This is Lennox, about 8 years old. These are the wheels for Locomotive 309. And this is Lennox last year. This is Locomotive 309, who's standing next to the wheels. And actually, Lennox got married yesterday, and we took Lennox and his bride-to-be and the wedding party to Renaissance Village on the train, of course. Has it been successful? We are a National Historic Landmark. Our ridership is on track to beat last year. Locomotive status better than ever. Equipment status better than ever. Building status better than ever. We estimate, using Travel Nevada figures, that the railroad has brought in over $100 million in tourist spending to Ely and Nevada. Short version is, we have the buzz. Any questions at all?
While we're waiting some of the questions to come in, I have a question for you, Mark.
Yes.
And I'm sure you get this question all the time, so excuse me, but what is one of your favorite things that you love to do with the railroads?
Actually, watch the faces of the children. In fact, one of our young visitors, when you go into the engine house early in the morning, you can hear a pin drop on the floor. It's that quiet. And the crew will light off a steam locomotive, and the locomotive literally becomes alive. It starts breathing. And in fact, one of our young visitors said it's like waking a sleeping dragon. And they create a personality, and we do allow people to get up close to it. So that's what I enjoy the most.
That is great. Yeah, sharing that enthusiasm, I'm sure you get a lot of great responses. So, so I have a question here. How many staff do you have to operate this complex?
We currently have 22 employees. We have 3 interns for the summer, and we also have 2 part-time employees. When I started 20 years ago, we had 4 employees.
That's great.
And just like you were saying earlier, Catherine, it's not enough.
Somehow it never is, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the more you accomplish, the more, help you need. So I
Yep,
can see
exactly.
that. So we have another question here. So what is spending the night in the bunkhouse like?
Well, that's just it. You can make a we're going to bring that back if COVID stays tapped down next year. There are 4 sleeping rooms, 2 bathrooms, and a sitting area and a kitchen. And the bunkhouse is literally in the middle of the rail yard. And the building was built about 1906, and we have rehabbed it. So you check in at the gift shop. We take you over to the bunkhouse, give you a key, and introduce you to the people that might be staying there if they're there. And you get to spend the night there. And if we have an early morning rental, the steam locomotive goes right by the back door and wakes you up.
That's great. One thing I noticed that you had that reception room. It looks like there was a microwave. Is there a little cooking facility, or do people go into the restaurants?
Oh, no, actually, we have on the other side, if you had turned 180 there, there's a full kitchen there too, because the interns and our volunteers stay there. So they'll do barbecues periodically and have potlucks, and they invite everyone to do that.
All right. Oh, that's really great. So I see another question here. What is the favorite food out of your Locomotive cookbook, from the steam engine cookbook there?
It probably the bacon. I'd say the bacon. They do breakfast. There's a rule on the railroad, and it's a hard and fast rule. The locomotives will be coupled to the train 45 minutes before train time, period. Because they're century-old equipment, if there is an issue, it gives us 45 minutes to address the issue before the train departs. Well, I have young crews, and that 45 minutes, they cook breakfast. And so they'll do bacon, pancakes, eggs, French toast. It's pretty amazing.
Wow.
And Iron Horse Cookery does come back in 2023. And that's also a riot too, because when we did the first Iron Horse Cookery, I had to call the food inspector, and I said, we're doing this food contest, the whole bit. She says, that's fine. General public can't eat whatever the contestants cook. And I go, okay, I understand that. But I want to cook bacon and serve it to the public. So in the firebox of the steam locomotive, and there's this pause, and she goes, I don't think I can approve that. And I go, well, let's talk about this. In Reno, there's a pizzeria that has a coal-fired oven. They cook pizzas in there. They have a food license. So just think of our firebox as a pizzeria oven. And instead of a frying pan, we use a shovel that's sterilized. And it's essentially the same. And she thought about it and said, okay, I'll approve it. And so we had to do hand washing and everything, food handling protocols. And we put bacon in cups and served it to all the visitors who came for the Ironhurst Cookery. It was a riot.
Well, that sounds pretty fabulous. That's a great answer. And well, I have to admit, I love bacon too. So I probably picked that myself. Just scrolling down here. Pardon me while I look over here and see what other questions we have here.
Christine, I'm having a trouble running off on chat. And I wanted to ask Mark, what is the favorite item that is sold to tourists that go through the gift shop?
And I didn't add it in my presentation. I'll be in real trouble because I didn't do it. It is Dirt, our cat. And we have a shop cat that is 13 years old. And his nickname is Dirt because his favorite sleeping spot is up in the steam locomotives, which are oily, dirty, and he was born in the engine house. And we have a plushie of Dirt, and we have trouble keeping those in stock.
That's great. Oh my gosh.
And I should apologize that I didn't put a slide of Dirt in there. Dirt brings people here from literally around the world. The record right now is from mainland China. They flew from China to LA to Las Vegas, rented a car, drove to Ely to see Dirt.
Oh my gosh. That is great. I'm envisioning some sort of partnership now with animal rescue programs in the railroad.
Well, Dirt is getting up there in age, and so we did a second rescue cat. Dirt is orange and white tabby, and so we got another orange and white tabby, and his nickname is DJ for Dirt Jr. And he's learning the ropes, as it were. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is really great. And just so you know, for those of you that are on, can't see the chat, Washoe County Library just did a link to Dirk the cat through
thank you.
boardpanda.com.
Oh, yes.
Unique fur markings. So you can find Dirk too.
Well, Dirt has taken off in such popularity. We now have Dirt coffee cups, Dirt keychain. It's insane. It really and truly is. and people now are sending us sightings of Dirt because there's pictures in restaurants and people are wearing Dirt t-shirts. It's hilarious. It really is.
That's great. Well, again, there's another from your website, which is the Northern Nevada Railway.com pages/Dirt. So many opportunities to find Dirt.
Absolutely.
So I have a question here. Does Dirt have an Instagram?
No, he doesn't have an Instagram. We share his thoughts on our Facebook page. And Dirt just recently got his own caboose cat house. So, and we do get comments because Dirt is dirty and they go, oh my God, that Dirt needs to be rescued. When I die, if there's reincarnation, I want to come back as the shop cat. That cat is so beloved by staff and visitors and volunteers. He has no wants. And not only that, he knows he's famous. He'll be sleeping in his caboose, and when he'll hear the train come back, and he knows a tour is coming, so the tour guide will go into the machine shop and start talking, and out comes Dirt to be part of the tour, and that usually stops the tour for a bit.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Yeah.
I love that. He's He definitely knows his audience, I guess, then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right, I'm looking to look away to see what we have on our chat, and I am not seeing anything else. So, Neal, what do you say?
I say we brought in a star. I told you in the introduction, charismatic. Is he or is he not? He's a wonderful man, and he has really done a first-class job out there in Ely. He is a Nevada treasure.
Well, thank you, Neal. I'm very flattered. It's just not me, though. We have, like I said, over 6,000 members. We have over 100 volunteers, and the staff, the 20 some odd staff members, and it is a team effort. It's all of us working together that is creating the magic here. And it is magical. It is truly, truly magical. Sometimes when I'm the conductor, I come in early in the morning and I walk up to the transportation building, and the staircase there is worn. And this is where countless conductors have walked up since 1910 to get their train orders. And so I'll go up to the dispatcher station and pick up my train orders, just like they've been doing since 1910. And dispatcher gives me my orders, and I grab my train and head out of the yard. It's just really incredibly magical.
Well, a big thank you from all of us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all for joining us. That was a really fascinating presentation. I'm ready for a road trip out to Ely.
Good.
Thank you, Catherine Mcgee and Neal Cobb with the Nevada Historical Society, Mark Bassett with the Nevada Northern Railway, and John, our Washoe County Library System Tech Wizard, for making this event possible today. Thanks again, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Bye. Goodbye.
Thank you.